Welcome to our story, family. I am so glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. The unthinkable happened. The phone call came at 2 in the morning. I have always dreaded phone calls in the middle of the night. Those heralds of news too terrible to wait for the light of day. My trembling hand reached for the phone on the third ring. Mrs. Watkins, I am calling from Mercy Hospital. Your son, Tyler, has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You should come immediately. The world tilted on its axis. At 65 years old, I had survived my husband's death a decade earlier, but nothing had prepared me for this moment. Tyler, my brilliant and kind-hearted only child, could not be dying. It was not the natural order of things. I arrived at the hospital still wearing my nightgown under my coat, my hair uncombed, my hands shaking as I gave my name at the reception desk. A grim-faced doctor led me to a private consultation room, and the words that followed shattered my world. Massive aneurysm, no warning signs, nothing could have been done. He is already gone. He is already gone. My Tyler is gone. The hours blurred as paperwork was processed, and decisions no mother should ever have to make were forced upon me. It was almost noon when Brittany, Tyler's wife of 10 years, finally arrived. Designer sunglasses hiding her eyes, expensively manicured nails tapping impatiently on her phone. Traffic was terrible, she offered without meeting my gaze, and I had to find someone to watch Mason. I had already called Mason's elementary school, spoken to his teacher, and arranged for him to spend the day with his best friend's family. The fact that Brittany had not thought to do this, that she had left her 8-year-old son with no information about his father's condition, was sadly typical of the woman my son had married. Tyler is gone, I said, simply watching her reaction to know how to respond. Brittany's perfectly painted mouth formed a small O of surprise. Her hand fluttered to her throat in a gesture that might have looked natural if I had not spent years observing my daughter-in-law's calculated performances. But he was fine yesterday, Brittany said, her voice catching. We had dinner, and then he was working in his study. I went to bed early. I did not even say goodnight. For a moment, genuine regret seemed to cross her face, quickly replaced by something I could not quite identify: relief calculation. Whatever emotion had surfaced was quickly masked by a more appropriate expression of shock. As the day wore on, I watched Brittany make phone calls in hushed tones, stepping away whenever the hospital staff approached with questions about funeral arrangements. When decisions had to be made about Tyler's remains, Brittany delegated to me with a carelessness that seemed bizarrely detached. You know better than I do what he would have wanted. By nightfall, as we waited for Tyler's body to be released to the funeral home, William Hughes arrived. He was Tyler's closest friend from law school and his personal attorney. His genuine grief was evident in his red eyes and the tight embrace he held me in. I cannot believe he is gone, William whispered. I just had lunch with him on Monday. I nodded, unable to form words through my grief. William turned to Brittany, offering condolences that were met with a practiced, somber nod. We will need to meet soon, William said, his professional tone returning slightly. There are matters in Tyler's will that will require immediate attention. Brittany straightened up at this, wiping eyes that remained suspiciously dry behind her sunglasses. Of course. Perhaps tomorrow I would like to get things settled quickly for Mason's sake. The mention of my grandson pierced my fog of grief. Mason, the sweet, sensitive little boy who had just lost his father and whose mother was already thinking about getting things settled quickly. Mason needs to be told in person, I said firmly. I will go with you to pick him up. That is not necessary, Brittany replied quickly. I can handle my own son. The slight emphasis on "my" did not escape me. It was a familiar dynamic. Brittany asserting control over Mason when it suited her narrative of a devoted mother, while relegating actual parenting to Tyler, and increasingly to me. He adores you. Brittany added her tone, softening artificially. He will need you more than ever now. The manipulation was transparent to me. After 30 years as a college psychology professor, I had studied enough human behavior to recognize what she was doing. Brittany was already positioning herself, ensuring I would remain available for childcare while establishing clear boundaries of authority. As we left the hospital, I caught Brittany checking her reflection in a window, adjusting her hair before pulling out her phone to make another call. In that moment, off guard with no audience to perform for her face, showed neither grief nor shock, only a cold evaluation, like someone calculating their next move in a chess game. I turned away, my heart breaking all over again. Not only had I lost my beloved son, but it seemed my grandson was in the hands of a woman who viewed his father's death as an inconvenience, at best an opportunity at worst. What I could not know then was that Tyler had foreseen exactly this scenario and had taken extraordinary measures to protect me and his son from the woman he had finally recognized as a threat to us both. I have attended enough funerals in my 65 years to recognize genuine grief. It manifests differently in everyone. Some collapse inward, some lash out in anger, some become eerily calm, but there is an authenticity that cannot be manufactured. As I sat in the front pew of the church, watching people approach my son's casket, I observed a masterclass in emotional acting from my daughter-in-law. Brittany had dressed impeccably in a designer black dress that managed to be both appropriate and flattering. Her hair was styled in understated waves, her makeup subtle yet flawless, her tear-proof mask evident as she occasionally dabbed her dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She leaned against me at calculated intervals, murmuring things like, "He would have appreciated such a turnout." And Tyler always spoke so highly of everyone here. To observers, we looked like a united front of sorrow, the devastated widow and the heartbroken mother supporting each other through an unimaginable loss. Only I could feel how lightly she rested against my shoulder, ready to straighten up the moment someone important approached. Only I noticed how her eyes constantly scanned the room, assessing the social and financial status of each mourner. Only I caught the subtle shifts in her voice when she spoke to Tyler's wealthiest clients versus his childhood friends. But my attention was primarily on Mason sitting on my other side, his small body occasionally shaken by silent sobs. Unlike his mother, my grandson's grief was raw and real, his face stained with genuine tears. I kept my arm around him, offering tissues and silent comfort as he stared at the casket holding his father. "Is Dad really in there?" he whispered during a pause in the service. "His body is," I explained softly. "But the special part that made him your dad, his love, his thoughts, his spirit, that stays with you forever." Mason nodded, seeming to understand this distinction better than many adults. "I can still feel him sometimes, like he is watching." "I believe he is," I said, fighting back fresh tears. Brittany leaned across me. "Mason, sit up straight, people are watching." I felt his little shoulders tense under my arm. This concern for appearances over her son's emotional state was exactly why Tyler had been leaving Mason increasingly in my care over the past year. After the service, the procession of mourners offering condolences seemed endless. Tyler had been deeply loved by colleagues at his law firm, by clients he had helped, by neighbors and friends. Every person had a story about his kindness, his integrity, his subtle humor. "Your son helped me keep my house during my divorce," one woman told me, gripping my hands. "He reduced his fees when he knew I was struggling. Then he connected me with financial advisors who helped me get back on my feet." Tyler was the only lawyer who took my discrimination case when no one else would, an older gentleman said. He cared about justice, not just billable hours. These testimonials were a bittersweet balm to my aching heart. My son had lived his values. He had made a difference. I carefully tucked away every story in my memory, knowing Mason would cherish them someday. During the reception, I noticed Brittany having intense whispered conversations with several people, including a tall, expensively dressed man I did not recognize. When I approached, they smoothly separated Brittany, introducing him as Maxwell Carson, one of Tyler's real estate investment partners. "My condolences, Mrs. Watkins," he said, his handshake brief and impersonal. Tyler was a remarkable man. Something in his tone rang false, and the way Brittany's hand briefly touched his arm suggested a familiarity beyond a business relationship. I filed this observation away, my professor's brain automatically cataloging behavioral details even through my grief. By the late afternoon, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. Mason had fallen asleep on a couch in the funeral home's private family room, emotionally drained. As I draped his suit jacket over him like a blanket, William Hughes approached quietly. "Glenda, could we speak privately for a moment?" I followed him to a secluded corner, away from the lingering mourners. "Tyler left explicit instructions regarding certain matters," William said, keeping his voice low. "I cannot go into details just yet, but he asked me to tell you one thing immediately. Trust your instincts about Mason. Does that make sense to you?" I looked over at my sleeping grandson, then at Brittany, who was checking her makeup in a compact mirror while absent-mindedly nodding at condolences. "Yes," I said slowly, "I believe it does." "Good. We will need to meet officially tomorrow regarding the will, but Tyler wanted you to know that." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Arrangements have been made for both of you." Before I could ask further questions, Brittany walked over. Her social smile was firmly in place. "William, I hope we can get everything sorted out quickly," she said. "I'm thinking of taking Mason away for a while after this, a healing trip. It is probably best to handle the estate matters promptly." "Of course," William replied neutrally. "My office tomorrow at 2 o'clock. As we prepared to leave, I gathered Mason into my arms, his slight weight a precious burden. Brittany made no move to help, instead scrolling through her phone. 17 missed calls, she sighed. So many arrangements to make. I studied her composed face, noting the absence of the telltale signs of grief. No swollen eyes, no exhaustion of the spirit. None of the physical manifestations of anguish that were currently crushing me from the inside. "What arrangements?" I asked carefully, keeping my tone curious rather than accusatory. "Life goes on, Glenda," she said without looking up from her screen. "Bills, accounts, notifications. Tyler handled everything. Now it all falls on me." "Not us. No, we will figure it out together for Mason." The solitary "me" spoke volumes. As I settled Mason into my car, Brittany had asked if I could keep him overnight to give her space to process. I felt a strange sense of foreboding mixed with something else. Something that felt almost like my son's presence urging me to stay vigilant, to watch carefully, to protect what he could no longer protect. "We are going to be okay, Mason," I whispered to my sleeping grandson. "Somehow we are going to be okay." I did not yet know how prophetic or how challenging that promise would turn out to be. Tyler left everything to me. Brittany's perfect composure slipped for the first time as she sat in William Hughes's office the day after the funeral. I watched her face cycle through various emotions. First smug satisfaction, then confusion, and finally thinly veiled outrage as William continued reading the provisions of the will. "Not exactly," William corrected, his professional tone unchanged. "Mr. Watkins left you the lake property, his investment portfolio with Meridian Partners, and a life insurance policy of $500,000. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, as William outlined the inheritance that had left Brittany increasingly agitated. Although substantial by most standards, nearly $1 million in total, it clearly fell short of her expectations. The family home at 1742 Oakwood Drive, both vehicles and his personal bank account at First National are bequeathed to his mother, Glenda Watkins. William continued, not meeting either of our eyes as he read directly from the document. "That is impossible." Brittany interrupted, her carefully manicured nails digging into the leather armrests. "We bought that house together. It is our marital property." William slid a document across the desk. "The home was purchased solely in Tyler's name before your marriage. It was never converted to joint ownership. The deed and mortgage documents confirm this." I kept my expression neutral despite my own shock. Tyler had never mentioned any of these arrangements to me. The family home, a beautiful colonial house with 4 bedrooms and a backyard where Mason had his treehouse, was apparently mine, not Brittany's. So were Tyler's Mercedes sedan and Range Rover, along with a bank account I did not know existed. "What about Mason's college fund?" Brittany demanded, her voice rising slightly. "Tyler always said he was setting money aside for Mason's education." William nodded. "Mr. Watkins established a trust for Mason's educational expenses." "You are not the trustee of this account." "Then who is—" Brittany's question came out almost like a hiss. William looked at me briefly. "Glenda has been named the trustee of all funds related to Mason's care and education." The room fell silent as Brittany processed this information. I could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes, adding up assets, weighing options, formulating responses. "This makes no sense," she finally said, her voice deliberately modulated to convey hurt confusion rather than the anger I could see burning underneath. "Tyler and I discussed our estate plans. This is nothing like what we agreed upon." "The will was updated 3 months ago," William replied. "Tyler came to me specifically to make these changes. Everything is legally executed and witnessed." 3 months ago? Brittany's eyes narrowed. "He never mentioned any changes to me." "That was his prerogative," William answered simply. I remained silent, absorbing the implications of what I was hearing. 3 months ago, Tyler had secretly revised his will to ensure I would have the family home and financial resources while limiting Brittany's access to certain assets. The timing corresponded with a period when Tyler had seemed particularly troubled, often bringing Mason to stay with me for father-son weekends that I suspected were actually meant to give Tyler space to deal with marital issues. "There must be some mistake," Brittany said, turning to me with a practiced look of appeal. "Glenda, you know Tyler would have wanted his family to remain in their home. You have your own house. Surely you do not intend to take our home away from Mason." The subtle manipulation was impressive, framing any compliance with Tyler's wishes as me taking something away from my grandson rather than from her. I recognized the tactic but chose not to confront it directly. "I am as surprised as you are, Brittany," I said truthfully. "I need time to process all of this." William continued with additional details. Matters regarding personal effects, specific bequests to charities, funeral expenses that had been prearranged. Throughout it all, I noticed Brittany texting under the table, her face a mask of appropriate grief, occasionally interrupted by flashes of calculation. When the meeting concluded, William asked me to stay behind for a moment. Once Brittany had left with a tight-lipped promise to speak, soon directed at me, he closed his office door and sat across from me. "There is more," he said quietly. "Tyler left this for you with instructions to give it to you privately after the initial reading." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in my son's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I took it. "Should I?" I gestured toward the envelope. "Take it home," William advised. "Read it when you are alone and ready. And Glenda," he added, his professional demeanor softening. "Tyler knew exactly what he was doing. Trust that." I nodded, slipping the envelope into my purse as I stood to leave. In the lobby, I found Brittany engaged in an intense phone conversation, her back turned to the receptionist's desk. I paused out of sight, but within earshot. And took me completely by surprise. She was saying, her voice low but furious. "The house, the cars, even access to Mason's educational fund. No, I do not think she suspected anything. It must have been his mother's influence. Of course I am going to fight this Maxwell. I have dedicated 10 years to this family. I deserve more than a vacation property and insurance money. I backed away quietly, taking the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator where Brittany might see me. My mind raced with questions, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Tyler had anticipated something I was only just beginning to understand. Back at my modest home with Mason still at school, I finally opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Tyler's law firm letterhead. Mom, if you are reading this, the unthinkable has happened. I am so sorry to leave you with this burden, but there is no one else I trust more. My marriage has been failing for some time. What started as growing apart has evolved into something more troubling. I have discovered things about Brittany that make me fear for Mason's future emotional well-being and for your security. I have arranged things to protect you both. The house, the cars, and the money are not really for you. They are tools to ensure Mason has a stable, loving parental figure when I am gone. Brittany will fight this. She will try to manipulate you. Do not let her know what you know or suspect. Watch and wait. Document everything regarding Mason's care. William has the rest of my instructions and evidence I have gathered. He will help when the time is right. I love you, Mom. You taught me to see people clearly and to plan ahead. I am counting on those same qualities now to protect my son, Tyler. I pressed the letter to my chest, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. Even facing his own mortality, Tyler had been thinking of protecting his son and me. I now understood my mission clearly. For my son's sake, for Mason's future, I would need to become something I had never been before. A strategic opponent in what was clearly going to become a battle of wills and manipulation with Brittany. It was time to put my psychology background to its most important use. Grandma, when is Dad coming back? Mason's innocent question during breakfast 3 days after the funeral pierced my heart. At 8 years old, he was old enough to understand death conceptually, but still young enough to hope for impossible miracles. Oh, sweetheart, I said softly, setting down my coffee mug and taking his small hand in mine. Do you remember what we talked about? Dad cannot come back. His body stopped working because of the aneurysm in his brain. Mason nodded, his eyes cast downward. I know, but sometimes I forget when I first wake up. I keep thinking he will come make pancakes like on Saturdays. I swallowed hard past the lump in my throat. I know it is hard. I miss him too, every single minute. Would you like me to make pancakes on Saturdays now? It would not be the same, he mumbled. Then he added quickly, but I would like it anyway. I was staying at Tyler's house. My house now, according to the will, to help care for Mason while Brittany dealt with important paperwork, as she had vaguely explained. In reality, I suspected she was meeting with her own attorney to contest Tyler's will, but I kept this thought to myself. After dropping Mason off at elementary school, where his teacher had been wonderfully understanding, I returned to the house to find Brittany waiting in the kitchen. She had let herself in with her key, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that conveyed formal mourning. Glenda. She greeted me with a cheek kiss that did not reach her eyes. I am glad you are here. We need to talk about arrangements moving forward. Of course, I replied, maintaining the polite, somewhat deferential demeanor I had decided to adopt as my strategy. Would you like some coffee? Please. She sat at the kitchen island watching me as I moved around what was technically now my kitchen. All of this is so overwhelming. The paperwork, the accounts, the decisions. I can only imagine, I murmured sympathetically, playing my part while recalling the angry phone conversation I had overheard. How can I help? Brittany's perfectly made-up face registered brief surprise at my accommodating tone, quickly replaced by a calculated warmth. You are so sweet, Glenda. I have actually been thinking about what makes the most sense for everyone, especially for Mason. Here it comes, I thought, keeping my expression open and receptive. This house holds so many memories of Tyler. She continued, her voice adopting a practiced tremor. "Every room reminds Mason of what he has lost. It might be healthier for him, for both of us, to get a fresh start somewhere else." I nodded thoughtfully as I placed a mug of coffee in front of her. "You are considering moving?" "I found a lovely condo downtown near the cultural district. Excellent schools nearby, walking distance to the art museum and the library." She stirred her coffee deliberately. "The thing is, Glenda, with the way Tyler arranged things, I will need your cooperation." "Oh." I tilted my head inquisitively, as if I had not already anticipated this conversation. "The situation with the will is obviously some sort of mistake or misunderstanding. Tyler would never have intentionally put me in such a difficult position." Her tone hardened slightly before she caught herself. "I have spoken with an attorney who suggests we could avoid lengthy legal proceedings if you were to simply transfer the house back into my name, as Tyler would have wanted." I widened my eyes, projecting thoughtful consideration instead of the outrage I felt at her attempt to manipulate me using my son's supposed wishes. "I see. And what does your attorney say about the fact that Tyler updated his will just 3 months ago, specifically to make these arrangements?" A flash of irritation crossed her face before her mask of reasonable grief returned. Tyler was not himself those last few months. He was overworking, stressed about cases. He was not thinking clearly about the best interests of our family. I nodded as if considering this explanation. "That must have been difficult for both of you." "It was," she sighed dramatically, "which is why I believe he would want us to correct this oversight now for Mason's sake." The invocation of Mason's well-being, her trump card, was deployed exactly as I expected. I took a deliberate sip of coffee, giving myself time to formulate my response. "I understand your concern," I finally said, "but making hasty decisions while grieving is not wise. Perhaps we should give ourselves some time to adjust before making any major changes." Brittany's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course you need time. But the condo I found will not be on the market for long. It would be much easier on Mason if we could settle things quickly and allow him to transition to a new environment." I recognized the sales tactic, creating artificial urgency to force a quick decision. My years teaching negotiation strategies to psychology students had not been wasted. "Why do we not ask Mason how he feels about moving?" I suggested mildly. "He might find comfort in staying in the home where he has so many memories of his father." "Children do not always know what is best for them," Brittany countered smoothly. "That is why adults make these decisions. Besides, he is already dealing with enough emotional turmoil." I noted how skillfully she had positioned herself as the protective mother, while subtly suggesting I would harm Mason by consulting him about his own feelings. Tyler's letter echoed in my memory. "She will try to manipulate you." "You are probably right," I conceded, watching a flicker of relief cross her features. "Let me think about all of this for a few days. It has been such a shock." "Of course," she agreed clearly, believing she had made progress. "Take the weekend. But Glenda," she added, her voice dropping to a confidential tone, "I am worried about finances with the current situation." "Oh," I prompted. "Tyler handled everything, and now I am finding credit card bills, the mortgage that was now my responsibility according to the will." But I kept this observation to myself. "I would be happy to help look over the household accounts," I offered, seizing the opportunity. "Perhaps we could review everything together." "That is not necessary," she said quickly. "I just meant that resolving the house situation would help me access the equity we have built up for Mason's education and well-being. The education fund that Tyler had placed specifically under my control as trustee. I wondered if she realized how transparent her motivations were to someone trained in observing human behavior. "Let us talk more next week," I suggested, standing up as if our conversation had reassured rather than alarmed me. "I should get some rest before picking Mason up from school." After Brittany left, I sat alone in the quiet house, mentally reviewing our interaction. She clearly believed I was an older, grieving, and somewhat passive woman who could be maneuvered into surrendering what Tyler had entrusted to me. For now, I needed her to continue believing exactly that. I picked up my phone and called William Hughes. I need to understand exactly what evidence Tyler gathered, I told him without preamble, and how we can gather more. This is going to be a longer game than I anticipated. Come to my office tomorrow morning, William replied. There's much more you need to know. Beneath my grief, a steely resolve was forming. Tyler had trusted me to protect his son. I would not let him down. Mom says I have to go to Miami with her next weekend, but I do not want to. Mason's worried face looked up at me as I tucked him into bed 1 week after Tyler's funeral. This was the first I had heard of any trip to Miami, which immediately set off alarm bells. Miami. I kept my voice casual while my mind raced. That sounds like an adventure. Mason shook his head, clutching his stuffed dinosaur tighter. She says her friend Maxwell has a boat and we are staying in a fancy hotel. But I have my science project due on Monday and Dad always helped me with my projects. I stroked his hair gently. Did you tell your mom about the science project? She said I can skip it. The teachers understand when your dad dies. His voice cracked as he said the word, but Dad would not want me to skip it. He always said commitments are important. Your dad was right about that. I agreed, making a mental note of this conversation. Let me talk to your mom tomorrow. Maybe we can figure something out. After Mason fell asleep, I called William Hughes at his home number, which he had provided for urgent matters. Miami. William's voice sharpened when I explained the situation. With Maxwell Carson. Do you know him? I asked, surprised. He is the real estate developer I mentioned in our meeting yesterday, the one Tyler was concerned about. William's tone was carefully measured. Glenda, did you set up the home surveillance system I recommended? Yes. The technician finished today. Cameras in the common areas and the security system sends alerts to my phone. I had followed William's advice to upgrade the home security, though the underlying purpose was different from what a grieving family would normally install. Good. That recording capability may prove valuable. He paused. I am sending you some materials from Tyler's private file tomorrow via courier. Do not open the package where anyone can see you. The next morning, after taking Mason to school, I received a sealed manila envelope. Inside were printouts of text messages between Brittany and someone saved in her phone as MC, dated at various times over the past 8 months. Tyler had apparently accessed her phone records through means I preferred not to question. Given his legal background, the messages painted a damning picture of an affair that had started almost a year ago. Plans made and broken complaints about Tyler working late, about being trapped in her marriage, references to Mason as the complication in their relationship plans. The most disturbing were exchanges from just 2 months ago. MC. How much longer are we going to stay in this limbo? Brittany. You said you were ready to leave your wife. Patience. Tyler's name is on everything important. I need to get the financial matters in a better position first. Working on it. Brittany. The property at Skyman is not going to wait forever. Perfect opportunity for a fresh start. MC, trust me. A few more months tops. Everything will fall into place. I leaned back, my hands shaking slightly. These were not just messages documenting an affair. They revealed that Brittany had been planning to leave Tyler, but wanted to secure the financial assets first. Tyler had discovered these messages and changed his will in response. That was why Brittany had been so shocked by the provisions. Another document in the packet was a private investigator's report that Tyler had commissioned, containing photographs of Brittany and Maxwell Carson entering a hotel, together expense reports, showing gifts he had bought her and background information on Carson's business dealings, some of which appeared ethically questionable. The final item was a handwritten note from Tyler to William, dated just 3 weeks before his death. Attached is everything I have gathered. I am not sure what my next steps should be. Confronting her could jeopardize my access to Mason if things turn ugly. I need to protect him above all else. meeting with you next Thursday to discuss options. Tyler had died on Tuesday. The meeting never happened. Armed with this knowledge, I approached my conversation with Brittany about the Miami trip strategically. I waited until she came to pick up Mason's weekend bag that Friday afternoon. Mason mentioned you are planning a trip to Miami. I kept my tone light curious rather than confrontational. Just a quick weekend getaway, Brittany replied, checking her expensive watch. Good for him to have a distraction. He is worried about missing his science project deadline, I mentioned casually. You know how Tyler always emphasized academics? Brittany's smile grew tight. One missed weekend will not hurt his grade point average. Glenda, the school psychologist, actually recommended new experiences for processing grief. I nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Though I wonder if a boat trip with... I hesitated deliberately. Maxwell was it. Might be too much so soon after losing his father. Mason seems anxious about it. Her eyes narrowed slightly at my mention of Maxwell's name. Mason will be fine. Children are adaptable. They certainly are, I agreed, though sometimes they need familiar routines during trauma. I would be happy to keep him here to finish his project if that would help with your plans. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, weighing the freedom of a child-free weekend against her need to maintain the appearance of devoted motherhood. That is considered unnecessary, she said finally. This trip is about mother-son bonding. Of course, I conceded. And then I added innocently, oh, I have been meaning to ask. Do you know the password to Tyler's computer? I was hoping to find some pictures for a memory book his counselor suggested. I do not keep track of Tyler's passwords, she said dismissively. Have William check his office files. Another note for my growing mental catalog. Brittany claimed not to know Tyler's passwords information most spouses would share. I had already found his password notebook in his desk drawer, but her response was telling. One more thing, I said as she turned to leave. Mason's teacher wants parent volunteers for their field trip to the Science Museum next Wednesday. Since I am not officially a parent, I thought you might want to sign up. Children who have lost parents apparently find these outings especially difficult. It was a test, one I suspected she would fail. Wednesday, I have an all-day spa appointment, she added with a performative sigh. I have been waiting weeks for mental health care, you understand. Of course, I said sympathetically. Self-care is important during grief. I will explain it to Mason's teacher. After she left with a promise to return Sunday evening with Mason, I immediately called William. She is taking Mason to Miami with Maxwell Carson, I reported. I need to document this trip carefully. I am already on it, William assured me. I have hired the same investigator Tyler used. We will have photographs of everything. Miami is actually helpful for our purposes. It shows her priorities clearly. And if Mason is upset by the trip, I could not stop the worry from leaking into my voice. Document his emotional state when he returns. Have him speak to his counselor about it. Every reaction becomes evidence. I hated viewing my grandson's pain as evidence, but I understood the necessity. Building a case for Mason's well-being meant carefully cataloging everything that threatened it. As I prepared for a weekend alone in Tyler's house, my house, I thought about the theatrical production unfolding around us. Brittany playing the grieving widow while planning getaways with her lover, me playing the understanding mother-in-law while gathering ammunition, even Mason unwittingly providing crucial insights through his innocent comments and reactions. The only person not acting was Tyler, whose absence remained the most powerful presence in our lives. I am watching Tyler, I whispered, touching the framed photo of him on the mantel. Just like you asked. And I am learning more than Brittany realizes. Mason returned from Miami with sunburned shoulders, a stomach ache from too much ice cream, and an emotional withdrawal that broke my heart. He shuffled into the house on Sunday night hours later than Brittany had promised to bring him back, his small face tight with exhaustion. "How was your trip, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling to his level while Brittany texted rapidly on her phone behind him. Mason shrugged his eyes downcast. The boat made me sick. He is being dramatic. Brittany chimed in without looking up from her screen. It was just a little motion sickness. The resort was 5-star, the weather was perfect. He had a wonderful time. Mason's expression told a different story, but he remained silent, shooting a quick glance at his mother before muttering, "Can I go to my room?" "Of course," I said softly. "I will bring you some ginger tea for your stomach in a few minutes." As he trudged up the stairs, I noticed he was not carrying his backpack. Mason forgot his school bag. Brittany waved a dismissive hand. "It got wet on the boat, nothing important in it." His science project materials were in that bag. I pointed out, carefully keeping the accusation out of my tone. "Can he get an extension? I will write a note." She finally looked up from her phone, her expression daring me to challenge her. "Richard sends his regards, by the way. He was disappointed you could not join us." The blatant mention of her lover made my stomach clench, but I maintained my facade of oblivious politeness. "How thoughtful. I hope you enjoyed your weekend." "Very much," she replied, a hint of triumph in her smile. "Maxwell has wonderful connections in Miami. We are looking at investment opportunities down there." "How nice," I murmured, making a mental note of this casual admission of future plans. I should go check on Mason. Upstairs I found my grandson sitting on his bed staring at a photo of Tyler on his nightstand. The room was exactly as he had left it on Friday, homework still spread across his desk. Work he clearly had not touched all weekend. "Do you want to tell me about the trip?" I asked, gently sitting beside him. His lower lip trembled. Mom was on her phone the whole time. She and Maxwell talked about boring adult stuff and left me with the hotel babysitter. "Even at night?" My heart sank. He nodded miserably. 2 nights. The babysitter fell asleep watching television, and I got scared because I did not know where I was when I woke up. I called Mom's room, but she did not answer. I kept my expression neutral while internally boiling with rage. That must have been scary. Maxwell has a big boat, but he would not let me touch anything. He said kids ruin things, and Mom laughed when he said that, even though Dad always let me help steer our little boat. Every detail was another piece of evidence. Another example of Brittany prioritizing her new relationship over her son's emotional needs. I made careful mental notes to record later in the journal William had suggested I keep. "Did you tell Mom you were scared or upset?" I asked. Mason shook his head. "She was having fun. She told me in the car that it is important for her to be happy again and that I should not make things harder by complaining." The manipulation of making an 8-year-old responsible for his mother's happiness, especially one morning his father sent a surge of protective anger through me. I pushed it down, focusing instead on comforting Mason. "It is okay to have feelings about things," I told him, pulling him gently against my side. "Even when adults are having fun, your feelings matter too." He leaned against me, his small body relaxing slightly. "Dad always asked about my feelings." "I know, sweetheart. I know." After settling Mason with tea for his stomach and helping him salvage what we could of his science project, I documented the evening's revelations in my journal, adding them to the growing catalog of concerning behaviors. William had explained that establishing patterns was crucial. Any isolated incident could be explained away, but consistent patterns of neglect or poor judgment would build our case. Over the next 2 weeks, those patterns emerged with disturbing clarity. Brittany began staying out late without explanation, leaving Mason with me more frequently. She missed his school conference, sending me instead with a vague excuse about estate meetings. She forgot to refill his asthma medication, necessitating an emergency run to the pharmacy when he had a mild attack during soccer practice. Every incident was meticulously documented in my journal. Each one showed a mother increasingly detached from her child's daily needs. While I stepped in to fill the void, I was careful not to criticize Brittany directly in front of Mason, focusing instead on providing the stability and attention he craved. The security system I had installed captured telling moments. Brittany, bringing Maxwell to the house late one night, both slightly intoxicated, unaware that Mason was awake, and witnessed their intimate behavior in the kitchen. Brittany instructing Mason to remember to tell Grandma you had a great time today, after a rushed outing where she spent most of the time on business calls. Multiple instances of her promising Mason she would attend his activities, then canceling at the last minute. My performance as the understanding, somewhat naive mother-in-law continued throughout this time. I offered to help with Mason's care in ways that seemed generous rather than strategic. I expressed sympathy when Brittany claimed grief brain for forgotten commitments. I avoided confrontation when she made veiled remarks about moving forward with selling the house. "Glenda, we need to discuss the house situation," she said one evening 3 weeks after Tyler's death. She had dropped in unexpectedly while I was helping Mason with homework, dressed for what was clearly a dinner date rather than a mother-son evening. "Of course," I replied pleasantly. "I have been meaning to ask you what items you would like to keep when I move in permanently next month." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Move in? I thought we agreed the house should be sold." "Oh, I do not recall agreeing to that," I said smoothly. "Actually, I have been thinking it is best for Mason to maintain stability right now. His therapist mentioned how important familiar environments are during mourning." Her expression hardened momentarily before she forced a concerned smile. "I am worried about you, Glenda. This house is too big for you to manage alone. And the financial burden, the mortgage, utilities, upkeep." "Tyler left the house completely paid off," I mentioned casually, watching her reaction. "No mortgage to worry about, and I am more capable than I look. All those years running a college department taught me quite a bit about managing complex responsibilities." Something shifted in her evaluation of me, a recalculation I could almost see happening behind her eyes. I had revealed myself as slightly more formidable than she had assumed, yet I still maintained my helpful, non-threatening demeanor. "We will discuss this later," she said finally. "I need to go. Important dinner meeting. Mason has already eaten and should be in bed by 9. After she left, I sat with Mason at the kitchen table, helping him rebuild the science project whose materials had been lost in Miami. As he carefully glued pieces of his solar system model together, he looked up suddenly. "Grandma, are you going to live here now instead of Mom?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" He shrugged, focusing intently on positioning Mars the correct distance from his styrofoam sun. "Mom told someone on the phone that you are trying to take the house away from her. She said you were being selfish." I chose my words carefully. "Your dad wanted to make sure we all had safe places to live. Sometimes adults do not agree on the details." "I want you to stay," he said simply. "You help me with homework and remember my medicine and make real food instead of just ordering pizza." His direct assessment of the situation, so innocent yet so perceptive, reinforced my resolve. This was no longer just about following Tyler's wishes. It was about protecting a child who clearly recognized, even at 8 years old, the difference between performative parenting and genuine care. "I will do everything I can to stay close no matter what," I promised him. It was the only promise I could make with absolute certainty as the larger battle continued to unfold around us. "I am thinking of taking Mason to my parents' house in Arizona for a few weeks." Brittany's announcement over morning coffee almost 4 weeks after Tyler's death seemed casual, but the timing triggered immediate alarms. I had just informed her that William Hughes needed to meet with us again regarding additional estate matters. Arizona. I kept my voice neutral while stirring my coffee. "That is quite far. What about Mason's school?" Brittany waved a dismissive hand. "He can miss a few weeks. Children are resilient." Tyler's favorite phrase, "children are resilient," sounded hollow coming from her lips, a convenient excuse rather than a thoughtful observation. "When were you thinking of going?" I asked mentally, calculating how this might align with the increasingly urgent timeline William had mentioned. "Next week, ideally." She checked her expensive watch. "My parents have been begging to see him, and frankly, I could use the support system. Being a sudden single mother is overwhelming. I stopped myself from observing that she had essentially been a single mother by choice for months, given how frequently she delegated Mason's care to Tyler and me even before the affair began. That is understandable, I said instead, though I wonder if such a big trip might be difficult for Mason right now. He just got back into his school routine, and his grief counselor mentioned that consistency is important. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you suggesting I do not know what is best for my own son? Not at all. I backtracked, maintaining my non-threatening persona. Just thinking out loud, I am sure you have considered everything carefully. I have. Her tone softened, becoming almost conspiratorial. Actually, Glenda, I wanted to discuss something important with you. Could we get dinner tonight? Just the two of us. I will have my assistant watch Mason. I raised an eyebrow. Your assistant? Maxwell's assistant, she corrected smoothly. Melissa is wonderful with kids. She has helped with Mason before. Another detail from my journal. Brittany was leaving Mason with her lover's assistant rather than his grandmother who lived 15 minutes away. I made a mental note to ask Mason about these previous occasions. I would be happy to watch him, I offered. But dinner sounds lovely. What did you want to discuss? Everything, she said vaguely. The house Mason's future, how we move forward from here. I think I have come up with a solution that works for everyone, huh? Her confident smile suggested she believed she had formulated an irresistible proposal. I agreed to meet her at an upscale downtown restaurant at 7 o'clock, curious about what strategy she had devised. The restaurant she had chosen was deliberately impressive. The kind with minimalist decor, tiny portions, and prices that made you wince. Brittany was already seated when I arrived, looking elegant in a designer dress that somehow managed to suggest tasteful mourning while remaining fashionable. Glenda, thank you for coming. She greeted me air-kissing near my cheek. I ordered a bottle of Veuve Clicquot. Tyler always said it was your favorite. It was not. Tyler knew perfectly well that I preferred a simple Chardonnay, but the manufactured intimacy was part of her performance. How thoughtful, I murmured, settling into my chair, though I rarely indulge even before Tyler's passing. She poured the champagne anyway, raising her glass in a toast to new beginnings and solutions. I sipped politely, waiting as she established the atmosphere she wanted. Cordial, generous, intimately warm. The manipulation was textbook. Create a pleasant environment. Establish rapport, suggest shared understanding before making your pitch. Glenda, she began after our overpriced appetizers arrived. These last few weeks have been so hard on all of us. Losing Tyler, trying to help Mason cope, dealing with all the practical matters. I nodded encouragingly, playing my part. I have been thinking about what really matters. She continued, her voice adopting a practiced sincerity. Family security, peace of mind. And I believe I have found a way for us both to have what we need. I am listening, I said, slicing a tiny piece of my overpriced scallop. You and I both know that Tyler's will has created, well, complications. She delicately sipped her champagne. The house, the vehicles, the accounts. It is all rather awkward. Not at all what Tyler would have wanted if he had been thinking clearly. I remained silent, letting her spin her proposal without interruption. I have spoken with an excellent estate attorney who specializes in these situations. He believes we could easily contest the will based on Tyler's state of mind those last few months, the stress he was under, the medications for his previous heart condition. It would not be hard to prove diminished capacity. My heart clenched at the casualness with which she suggested invalidating my son's final wishes, but I kept my expression neutral. I see, but litigation is so unpleasant, I prompted. Exactly, she continued smoothly. It creates divisions, it drags on for months or even years. It is not what Mason needs right now. Absolutely not, I agreed, wondering where this performance was heading. She leaned forward, lowering her voice confidentially. So I have come up with a better solution, one that gives us both what we want without messy court battles. And what would that be? I asked, genuinely curious about her strategy. You transfer the house and the vehicles to me as Tyler's widow, she explained, as if offering a tremendous favor. In exchange, I will guarantee that you can see Mason regularly, perhaps every other weekend, major holidays. I will even put it in writing. The breathtaking audacity of her offer, essentially holding my own grandson for ransom, almost caused me to lose my carefully maintained composure. She was proposing that I surrender everything Tyler had left me in exchange for permission to see Mason rights I already had as his grandmother. That is quite a proposition, I managed to say, taking another sip of champagne to hide my reaction. I know it is generous, she agreed, misinterpreting my hesitation as consideration. Most women in my position would fight for everything, but I value your relationship with Mason, and frankly, I could use the help occasionally. Occasionally, I repeated, catching the telling choice of words. Well, single motherhood is demanding, she sighed dramatically, and I have my career to consider. Plus, Richard and I... She stopped, recalibrating. I mean, eventually, I will want to rebuild my personal life. Having guaranteed childcare arrangements would be tremendously helpful. There it was, the true motivation. Not Mason's well-being, but convenient childcare arrangements that would allow her to pursue her relationship with Maxwell unhindered. What about Mason's trust fund? I asked innocently. It would remain as Tyler arranged it. A flash of irritation crossed her features before she smiled again. That is also unnecessarily complicated. As his mother, I should have control over his educational expenses. Children's needs change. They require flexibility. They certainly do. I agreed, thinking of all the ways Mason's needs had been ignored in recent weeks. So, she said, pulling a folded document from her purse, I took the liberty of having my lawyer draft a simple agreement. You transfer the assets back to where they belong. I guarantee your visitation rights. Clean, simple. Everybody wins. She slid the paper across the table with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. I took the document, scanning the language that would effectively undo everything Tyler had arranged to protect Mason and me. This is quite comprehensive, I commented, buying time as I formulated my response. And what about Arizona Mason and I would still have our visits and time together? About that, she said, her expression turning apologetic. The trip to Arizona might become more permanent. Maxwell has development opportunities there, excellent private schools for Mason. It would be a fresh start for everyone. And conveniently far away from me and anyone else who knew Tyler or could question her parenting. The pieces of her plan fit perfectly into my understanding. I will need to think about this, I said, folding the document and placing it in my own purse, and perhaps have William review it since he is familiar with Tyler's wishes. Her smile tightened. I would not involve William. He is quite old-fashioned in these matters. My lawyer assures me this is completely standard. I nodded thoughtfully. Even so, such an important decision deserves careful consideration. Tyler always taught me never to sign anything without proper review. She could not argue with invoking Tyler's advice without seeming disrespectful, so she simply smiled and signaled for the check. Of course, take a few days, but Glenda, she added, her voice adopting a subtle edge. This really is the best solution for everyone. Fighting me on this would only hurt Mason in the long run. The veiled threat hung between us as she paid for our expensive meal with what I suspected was Tyler's credit card. I maintained my mask of thoughtful consideration, thanking her for dinner and promising to give her proposal the attention it deserved. As I drove home, my hands finally allowed themselves to shake on the steering wheel. The audacity, the manipulation, the casual way she planned to separate Mason from his remaining connections to Tyler, everything confirmed what I had been documenting for weeks. I called William from my car. She is planning to take Mason to Arizona permanently, I said without preamble, and she has offered me a deal with the devil to get the house and the accounts. Perfect. William replied, surprising me. "This is exactly what we needed. Bring the document to my office first thing tomorrow morning. It is time to move to the next phase." "What next phase?" I asked, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. "We will file an emergency custody petition," William said simply, "and we will do it before she realizes what is happening." She actually put it in writing. I can hardly believe it. William Hughes shook his head in amazement as he reviewed the document Brittany had given me. We sat in his office early the next morning, our coffee growing cold as we dissected her proposal. "This is essentially a confession," he continued, highlighting sections with a yellow marker. "She is explicitly stating that she will allow you to see Mason only if you transfer assets that are legally yours. That is textbook coercion." And this part about Arizona. I pointed to the clause mentioning reasonable visitation, regardless of primary residence location. It establishes premeditation to take Mason away from his support system and familiar environment during his grief. William added another yellow highlight. Combined with the evidence we have gathered about her parenting patterns, this creates a compelling narrative. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. So what happens now? William put down his marker, his expression turning serious. "It is time to execute the contingency plan Tyler set up." I hoped it would not be necessary, but he prepared for this exact scenario. From his desk drawer, William pulled out a sealed envelope marked Emergency Protocol in Tyler's handwriting. My heart ached seeing my son's familiar handwriting. Tyler left detailed instructions on when and how to proceed if Brittany's behavior threatened Mason's well-being or if she tried to separate him from you. William opened the envelope carefully. The key component is an emergency custody modification petition. "Custody modification?" I repeated, stunned. Tyler wanted me to seek custody of Mason. "Temporary custody initially," William clarified, "based on documented evidence of parental neglect and the best interests of the child during mourning. Tyler believed, and I agree, that a judge would likely grant you temporary guardianship while a more permanent arrangement is determined." My hands trembled slightly. The responsibility Tyler had entrusted to me was enormous. Not just documenting Brittany's behavior, but potentially taking over Mason's primary care. "I am 65 years old, William. Would a court really consider me as a guardian over Mason's mother? Age is not a disqualifier, especially given your proven involvement in his life. And remember, we are not alleging that Brittany is an unfit mother in the traditional sense. We are proving that her current priorities and choices are detrimental to Mason's emotional well-being during a critical period of grief and adjustment." William laid out the evidence we had accumulated, my detailed journal documenting Brittany's absences and Mason's reactions, home security footage showing multiple concerning incidents, statements from Mason's teachers about missed conferences and incomplete homework, notes from his grief counselor about regression and anxiety that coincided with Brittany's increasing absences, photographic evidence of the Miami trip with Maxwell while Mason was left with hotel staff, and now the damning document proposing to use Mason as leverage. "We will need one more piece," William explained, "a third-party neutral evaluation of Mason's home environment and emotional state. I have arranged for a court-approved child psychologist to interview Mason tomorrow at his school. Standard procedure in these cases, nothing that would alarm Brittany if she found out." The methodical way Tyler had prepared for this contingency, down to identifying appropriate psychological evaluators, broke my heart all over again. How long had he been worried about Brittany's parenting? How much had he witnessed before deciding that such drastic measures might be necessary? When would we file the petition? I asked, trying to focus on practical matters instead of my turbulent emotions. Immediately after receiving the psychologist's report, assuming it supports our position. Probably within 48 hours. William's expression softened slightly. "Glenda, are you prepared for what comes next? Brittany will not just sit back. She will be furious. possibly vindictive. I thought of Mason's little face when he returned from Miami, the way he had confided in me that his mother had left him with strangers overnight, how he had clung to his father's picture while trying not to cry. I thought of Tyler, who had foreseen this situation and trusted me to protect his son when he no longer could. "I am prepared," I said firmly. "What is our next step?" "Maintain your current approach with Brittany. Do not let on that anything has changed. If she presses you for an answer on her proposal, tell her you are still considering it and have questions about some details." William began organizing documents into a legal folder. "Meanwhile, I will prepare the emergency petition and coordinate with the psychologist." As I left William's office, my phone buzzed with a message from Brittany. "I need your answer by tomorrow. Arizona arrangements pending. Important opportunity for Mason's future." The transparent attempt to create artificial urgency only strengthened my resolve. I typed a carefully calibrated reply. "Still reviewing. I have some questions about the visitation schedule. We can discuss it tomorrow evening." Her reply came immediately. "Fine, if we meet at the house, we will have Maxwell's lawyer present to address any concerns." Maxwell's lawyer. Not Tyler's, not a neutral party, not even her own independent lawyer. Another telling detail for our documentation. I spent the afternoon with Mason after school, helping him with homework and listening as he reluctantly described an incident that morning when Brittany had forgotten to pack his lunch. Then she scolded him for calling to remind her because she was in an important meeting. I recorded these details in my journal immediately after he went upstairs to play, noting his slumped posture and the way he had downplayed his mother's reaction, clearly accustomed to managing her emotions instead of his own. That evening, I received an unexpected call from William. The school psychologist met with Mason today during lunch. He informed me without preamble. Their preliminary findings are significant. Mason demonstrated elevated anxiety when discussing his home environment. He showed particular concern about being sent to Arizona and a clear attachment to you as his primary source of emotional support. "Is it enough?" I asked Hope, rising cautiously. "Combined with our other evidence, yes. I am filing the emergency petition first thing tomorrow morning. The judge I requested typically rules on these matters within 24 hours. Should I say something to Mason? I worried about preparing him for the possible upheaval. "Not yet," William advised. "Children his age have a hard time keeping sensitive information private. For now, maintain normal routines. If the judge rules in our favor, we will have a child specialist help explain the situation to him appropriately." I slept restlessly that night, torn between the hope that Mason could be protected from Brittany's neglect and anxiety over the conflict that would inevitably erupt. By morning, my resolve had strengthened. This was no longer about my preferences or even honoring Tyler's wishes. It was about a vulnerable child whose mother was making choices that compounded rather than helped his grief. William called at 10:17 in the morning. "The petition has been filed. Judge Carlton has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Oh, and Brittany will be served this afternoon." So soon, I did not expect things to move this fast. Judge Carlton takes child welfare cases seriously, especially when there is evidence of a possible parental flight risk. Brittany's Arizona plans raised red flags. I thought of my meeting scheduled for 7 in the evening with Brittany and Maxwell's lawyer that night. Should I meet with Brittany tonight as planned? Absolutely not, William said firmly. Once she is served with the court documents, you should have no direct contact except through legal representatives. Go to a hotel tonight if necessary. She's likely to be extremely volatile when she realizes what is happening. What about Mason? Concern for my grandson outweighed all other worries. The petition includes a provision for Mason to remain in his current home environment with you present until the hearing. The process server will explain that to Brittany. William paused. Glenda, this is going to get messy quickly. Are you absolutely sure you are ready? I thought of Tyler's letter, of his trust in me, of Mason's increasingly anxious behavior. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. You manipulative, scheming witch. Brittany's voice exploded through my phone hours after she was served with the emergency custody petition. I held the device away from my ear. Her anger was so incandescent, it seemed to radiate through the speaker. "How dare you try to steal my son from me? After everything I have done for you, my lawyers will destroy you. You will never see Mason again when this is over." Following William's advice, I remained silent, letting her fury burn out without engaging. Eventually, she seemed to register my lack of response. "Are you there? Say something," she demanded. "On the advice of my lawyer, I cannot discuss this matter directly with you," I finally replied, keeping my voice calm and neutral. "I will see you at the hearing tomorrow." "You will regret this," she hissed before the line went dead. I leaned against the kitchen counter, suddenly exhausted. The process server had arrived exactly at 2 p.m, delivering the petition documents to Brittany at her office. William had arranged for Mason to be with me after school, sparing him from witnessing his mother's inevitable explosion. Now, as evening approached, I faced the challenge of maintaining normalcy for Mason while preparing for tomorrow's hearing. He was sitting at the dining room table, focused on a math worksheet, blissfully unaware of the legal storm gathering around him. "Grandma, can we have spaghetti for dinner?" he asked, looking up from his multiplication problems. "The kind with your special sauce." "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, grateful for the distraction of ordinary tasks. "Would you like to help me make it?" As we chopped onions and stirred the sauce, I studied my grandson's face, looking for signs of additional stress. Brittany had called him earlier, her voice strained but controlled, explaining that she had an unexpected work emergency and that he would stay with me tonight. Mason had accepted this explanation without question, accustomed to his mother's frequent absences. "Mom sounded mad on the phone," he observed, suddenly sprinkling cheese over his portion of spaghetti. "Is she mad at me?" "No, absolutely not," I assured him quickly. "Adults sometimes get frustrated about work things. It has nothing to do with you." He nodded, looking relieved but not entirely convinced. "She said she would take me out for ice cream tomorrow to make up for missing our dinner, but she forgot the last time she promised." Another small piece of evidence. Broken promises becoming so routine that an 8-year-old child had learned to expect disappointments. I added mental notes to my documentation while maintaining an encouraging expression. "Let us enjoy our dinner tonight, and we will see what tomorrow brings," I suggested gently. I could not bring myself to make promises about tomorrow when I knew how completely our lives could change after the hearing. After putting Mason to bed with extra stories and reassurance, I called William for final preparation. "How is Mason?" he asked immediately. "Handling it," I replied, unaware of what is happening. As far as I can tell, Brittany called him briefly but kept her composure. "Good. Children are perceptive, but there is no need for him to carry adult burdens." William's voice adopted its professional tone. "For tomorrow, I have prepared a summary document of all the evidence for Judge Carlton. The psychological evaluation came back strongly in favor of our position." "What should I expect at the hearing?" I asked, trying to prepare myself mentally. "Judge Carlton runs a strict courtroom. This is a preliminary emergency hearing, so testimony will be limited. You will likely be asked about your observations of Mason's well-being and your ability to provide temporary care. Brittany will have a chance to respond to the allegations. Will Mason need to appear?" The thought of my grandson being questioned in court made my stomach clench. No, Judge Carlton has reviewed the psychologist's report and specifically excluded Mason from this initial hearing. If a full custody investigation proceeds, she might eventually speak with Mason in her chambers, but that would be weeks away. I exhaled with relief. And Maxwell Carson will be legally involved without standing, practically. He is paying for Brittany's high-powered lawyer, so his influence will be present. William paused. "Glenda, brace yourself. These hearings can get ugly. Brittany's likely strategy will be to paint you as a grief-crazed, controlling mother-in-law trying to steal her son." "I understand," I said, though my heart raced at the thought of public accusations. What matters is Mason. Exactly. Focus on that tomorrow. No matter what Brittany or her lawyer claim, remember why we are doing this. Sleep proved elusive that night. I checked on Mason, repeatedly watching his peaceful breathing and wondering how tomorrow's decision would affect the rest of his childhood. By morning, I was exhausted, but resolute, dressed in a conservative navy blue suit that William had advised would convey stability and reliability to the court. "Why are you so dressed up, Grandma?" Mason asked during breakfast, eyeing my unusual formal attire. "I have an important meeting." I explained, helping him pack his backpack. "Mrs. Wilson from next door will take you to school today, and either Mom or I will pick you up this afternoon." He accepted this with the flexibility of childhood, more concerned about whether his favorite shirt was clean than about the unusual arrangements of the day. I hugged him extra tight at Mrs. Wilson's door, wishing I could protect him from the looming uncertainty. The courthouse was imposingly formal, all marble and echoing hallways. William met me at the entrance. His expression was professionally composed, but visible lines of worry bracketed his eyes. Brittany is already inside with her lawyer, Gerald Winters from Mitchell and Blackwell. He is one of the most aggressive family law attorneys in the city. I nodded, unsurprised that Maxwell had secured top-tier legal representation. And our chances... Judge Carlton is fair but cautious. The evidence is compelling, but temporary removal of custody remains an extraordinary remedy. William squeezed my arm reassuringly. "Remember, this is not about winning or losing. It is about ensuring Mason has the right support during a critical time." Inside the courtroom, Brittany was sitting at a table with a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. She wore a conservative black dress, her hair pulled back in a modest style that contrasted sharply with her usual trendy appearance. The transformation into a grieving widow and devoted mother was complete, right down to the framed photo of Tyler and Mason that she had placed prominently in front of her. Her eyes met mine with glacial hatred as I walked in, before quickly adjusting her expression to one of wounded confusion, leaning in to whisper something to her lawyer. The performance had begun. Judge Carlton, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, entered precisely at 9 o'clock. Her no-nonsense demeanor suggested little patience for theatrics as she reviewed the file before her. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the temporary modification of custody for the minor Mason Watkins," she declared, peering over her reading glasses at both tables. "I have reviewed the petition and the supporting documentation. Let us proceed efficiently." Over the next hour, William presented our case methodically. The documented patterns of neglect, Brittany's increasing absences, the incidents from the Miami trip, the psychological evaluation, and finally, the damning document showing Brittany's attempt to use Mason as leverage. Gerald Winters countered with equal efficiency. He portrayed me as a meddling mother-in-law exploiting the temporary struggles of a grieving widow. He suggested that my obsessive documentation demonstrated an unhealthy fixation painting Brittany as a devoted mother temporarily overwhelmed by extraordinary circumstances. "Your Honor," Winters concluded smoothly, "Mrs. Watkins has kept her grandson overnight precisely 17 times since her son's death at Ms. Watkins' request to help during this adjustment period. This does not demonstrate neglect. It shows a mother wisely accepting support while processing her grief. The Arizona opportunity represents a fresh start, not an abandonment of support systems. When it was my turn to speak directly, I focused on Mason instead of Brittany. I described concrete examples of his anxiety, his academic struggles since Tyler's death, and the stability I had tried to provide for him. "Your Honor," I said, meeting the judge's evaluating gaze, "I am not looking to replace Brittany as Mason's mother. I am asking for temporary measures to ensure that his needs are prioritized during an exceptionally vulnerable time in his development. The evidence suggests that currently other priorities are taking precedence over those needs." Judge Carlton asked pointed questions to both sides, her expression revealing none of her thoughts. Finally, she announced that she would review the evidence in her chambers and return with her decision in 1 hour. The 60-minute wait in the courthouse hallway seemed eternal. Brittany and her lawyer conferred quietly at one end while William and I sat in silence at the other. When the bailiff finally called us back in, my legs felt like lead as I stood up to hear the decision that would determine Mason's immediate future. Judge Carlton wasted no time on preliminaries. Having reviewed all the evidence and testimony, I find sufficient cause for emergency intervention in the current custody arrangement. She declared, her voice firm and authoritative. Temporary guardianship of the minor Mason Watkins is hereby granted to Glenda Watkins for a period of 60 days. During this time, a full evaluation of the family situation will be conducted by court-appointed specialists. I exhaled shakily as she continued outlining the details. Brittany would have supervised visits 3 times a week. Neither party could remove Mason from the jurisdiction, and a comprehensive family evaluation would begin immediately. Across the courtroom, Brittany's composed facade broke completely. Her face contorted with fury as she turned to her lawyer, whisper-shouting accusations and demands for an appeal. Judge Carlton observed this reaction with a raised eyebrow before adding a final comment. "Ms. Watkins, your reaction to this temporary decision concerns me. I strongly advise you to use the upcoming evaluation period to demonstrate the mature parenting capacity your son needs rather than focusing on personal grievances." With a sharp strike of her gavel, she concluded, "Court is adjourned." As we exited the courtroom, Brittany blocked our path, her carefully applied makeup now smudged with angry tears. "This is not over," she hissed, ignoring her lawyer's restraining hand on her arm. "Do you think you have won? You have no idea what is coming." William stepped between us. "Ms. Watkins, all communications must go through the lawyers from this point forward. We will coordinate Mason's pickup from school today and arrange the first supervised visit." As Brittany was pulled away by her increasingly worried lawyer, I leaned against the wall. The magnitude of what had just happened washing over me. I had temporary custody of my grandson. Tyler's concerns had been validated by a court of law. Mason would be protected, at least for now. "What happens next?" I asked William. My voice was barely steady. "We pick up Mason from school. We explain the situation as gently as possible with the help of his counselor, and we begin to establish a stable routine." He touched my shoulder in support. "The hard part is just beginning Glenda, but for today at least, Mason is safe." "Grandma, is Mom ever coming back?" Mason's question pierced my heart as we sat on the porch swing, 6 weeks after the emergency custody hearing. His little legs dangled, not reaching the floor, as he watched the driveway where Brittany's car would normally appear for her supervised visits. Visits she had attended only sporadically over the past month and a half. "Your mom is going through a difficult time," I replied, carefully choosing words the family therapist had suggested. "She loves you. But sometimes adults struggle with big changes." Mason nodded with a wisdom beyond his 8 years. Like when Dad died and she started staying out late. His perception sometimes surprised me. Children notice much more than we give them credit for. "Something like that," I agreed, pulling him closer to my side. "How are you feeling about all of this?" He considered this seriously, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Sad sometimes, but not scared anymore." "Scared?" I prompted gently. "When Mom talked about Arizona, I was scared all the time," he admitted. "I did not want to leave my school and my friends and you. And I did not like Maxwell. He always talked to me like I was a baby or like I was not there." Each of these revelations was carefully noted in my ongoing documentation. The court-appointed evaluator had been meeting with Mason weekly and with Brittany and me separately. The comprehensive evaluation that Judge Carlton had ordered was nearing completion, with the final custody hearing scheduled for next week. The weeks since I gained temporary custody had been both challenging and healing. Mason was initially confused and upset when we explained the new arrangement, but his counselor had helped frame it as a special time with Grandma, while Mom sorts out adult problems. The stability of the routine, regular meals, consistent bedtimes, help with homework, and predictable expectations had gradually eased his anxiety. Brittany's reaction had been volatile and erratic. She attended the first few supervised visits with obvious resentment, spending much of the time on her phone or asking leading questions to Mason about whether he was happy or if I was being mean to him. Then she canceled 2 visits in a row, claiming work emergencies. When she returned, her approach had shifted to bringing expensive gifts and making elaborate promises about future trips and experiences. The most revealing visit had been 3 weeks ago when she arrived with Maxwell Carson unexpectedly attempting to bypass the court order specifying who could be present. When the visitation supervisor refused to allow Maxwell to join, Brittany left furiously, leaving Mason in tears, and without the visit, he had been anticipating all week. She had not come to the last 2 scheduled visits. "Do you think you will feel ready for the conversation with the judge next week?" I asked Mason, referring to the conversation in chambers that Judge Carlton had scheduled. The therapist had been preparing him, explaining that the judge simply wanted to hear his thoughts and feelings, not force him to choose between his mother and his grandmother. "I guess," he replied, kicking his feet rhythmically, "Miss Abernathy said I just have to tell the truth about what makes me feel safe and happy." "That is exactly right," I assured him, though my own stomach knotted at the thought of Mason facing such adult responsibilities. The following day brought an unexpected development. William called early in the morning, his usually measured tone tinged with urgency. "Glenda Brittany's lawyer just filed a motion to dismiss the custody case. They are requesting an immediate return to the original arrangement without restrictions." My hand tightened on the phone. "On what grounds?" "They are claiming the evidence was fabricated, that you manipulated Mason into making statements against his mother, and that Brittany's parenting decisions were reasonable responses to grief." My heart sank. Do they have any chance of success? Normally, I would say no. Our documentation is too thorough, the psychological evaluation is too clear. William paused. "But there is a complication. Maxwell Carson has connections with Judge Blackwell, who has been assigned to hear this motion while Judge Carlton is on medical leave." The implications were clear. Money and influence could potentially overturn weeks of careful evidence gathering and professional evaluations. "What can we do?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "I am filing counter motions immediately. But Glenda, there is something else you should know. Our investigator reports that Brittany and Maxwell have put down deposits on a property in the Cayman Islands. It is a jurisdiction with limited enforcement of American custody orders." The threat crystallized with terrifying clarity. If Brittany regained custody, even temporarily, she could potentially take Mason out of the country to a place where our legal protections would be difficult to enforce. "She would not." I started. Then I stopped. Of course she would. Everything I had learned about Brittany in these weeks confirmed that she saw Mason primarily as an accessory to the life she wanted, not as a vulnerable child with his own needs. "I am implementing additional safeguards," William assured me. "I have requested an emergency hearing with Judge Carlton upon her return next week. Meanwhile, document everything. Any communication from Brittany, any reaction from Mason, anything unusual." That night, while Mason worked on a school project about family traditions, my phone pinged with a message from Brittany. "We need to talk privately without lawyers. Meet me tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon at Riverside Park. Come alone, or the deal is off." I showed the message to William immediately, who advised against meeting her without witnesses. "This is exactly the kind of maneuvering around proper channels that worries me," he warned. Against his advice, I arranged to meet Brittany, but not alone. William would be nearby, out of sight, but within earshot, and he would record our conversation as permitted by our state's one-party consent laws. The park was almost empty when I arrived. Only a few mothers with toddlers in the distant playground. Brittany was sitting on a bench overlooking the river, her designer sunglasses hiding her eyes, her posture rigidly composed. "Thank you for coming," she said as I approached, her tone unexpectedly subdued. "I imagine your attack dog lawyer advised you against this." "I'm here because any resolution that helps Mason is worth exploring," I replied neutrally, taking a seat beside her but keeping my distance. Brittany was silent for a long moment, watching the river flow by. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its usual edge. "I am dropping the custody case." Of all the things I expected her to say, this was not among them. "What?" I asked. "Did you hear me?" She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes surrounded by unusual fatigue. "I am giving you full custody. No more court battles, no more supervised visits, no more evaluations and judgments." I studied her face, looking for the manipulation behind this sudden capitulation. "Why?" "Maxwell and I are moving to Grand Cayman next month. He secured development rights for a major resort property." She spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing a change in dinner plans instead of abandoning her son. "It is the opportunity of a lifetime. We will be there for at least 3 years establishing the project." "And Mason?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She shrugged slightly. "Mason needs stability, structure, all those things the evaluators keep emphasizing. I cannot provide him with that right now, not with the demands of relocating and launching a major development." The clinical detachment with which she discussed leaving her son, her only child who had just lost his father, left me momentarily speechless. "So you are just leaving," I finally managed to say. "I prefer to think of it as making the mature and responsible decision." Her tone suggested she expected praise for this decision. "I am putting Mason's needs first by recognizing that you are better positioned to meet them at this moment." "At this moment," I repeated. "For the foreseeable future," she clarified. "I will send support payments, of course. I will make video calls when possible. Maybe he could visit us during school breaks eventually." The casual way she outlined her transition from mother to distant relative made my heart ache for Mason. However, beneath my sadness, there was a profound relief. Mason would be free from more custody battles, more disappointments, more insecurity about his future. "What do you want from me?" I asked directly, feeling there had to be strings attached to this offer. "A clean break," she answered immediately. "No contested hearings, no forensic financial investigations, no more intrusion into my personal affairs. Sign the agreement my lawyer is drafting, and Mason stays with you while I start over. And the house Tyler's accounts." I was not worried about material assets, but I wanted to understand her complete proposal. "Keep them," she said with a dismissive gesture. "Maxwell's development will make those look like pocket change. I just want this chapter to close cleanly and quickly." As she outlined the details of her proposed arrangement, I maintained a neutral expression while inwardly marveling at the outcome Tyler had somehow foreseen. His careful planning, transferring assets to me, documenting Brittany's behavior, establishing trust for Mason had anticipated exactly this scenario. Brittany choosing her own desires over her son's needs when forced to face the responsibilities of genuine parenting. 1 week later, I sat in Judge Carlton's chambers as she reviewed the voluntary custody agreement Brittany had signed the day before leaving for Grand Cayman with Maxwell Carson. "This is an unusual resolution," the judge commented, studying the document carefully. "Ms. Watkins is relinquishing all parental rights, except for limited visitation at her discretion. She believes it is in Mason's best interest while she relocates internationally for an extended period." I explained using the diplomatic phrasing William had suggested. Judge Carlton's expression suggested she was not fooled by this characterization, but she nodded slowly. "Are you prepared to assume full legal guardianship of your grandson at your age, Mrs. Watkins?" Without hesitation, I replied firmly, "Mason needs stability, love, and connection to his father's memory. I can provide all 3. The judge studied me thoughtfully before signing the final orders. Based on all the evidence presented throughout these proceedings, as well as Ms. Watkins's voluntary relinquishment custody of Mason Watkins is hereby granted to Glenda Watkins, with arrangements for child support payments and limited visitation as described in the agreement. Outside the courthouse, with Mason waiting at home, with the kind neighbor who had helped us throughout this journey, I finally allowed myself to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. I had become, in every meaningful sense, my grandson's mother, a role I had never anticipated at 65 years old, but one I embraced with complete commitment. "Tyler would be proud," William said quietly as we walked to our cars. "He protected Mason the only way he could by trusting him to you." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Mason and I planted a memorial garden in the backyard. Tyler's favorite flowers and plants arranged around a small stone bench where we could sit and talk to Dad whenever Mason needed to. "Do you think Dad knew that Mom would leave?" Mason asked as we patted dirt around a young rose bush. The question caught me off guard with its insightfulness. "I think your father knew that sometimes adults make decisions based on what they want instead of what children need," I answered carefully. "And he wanted to make sure you always had someone who would put you first." Mason nodded, looking satisfied with this explanation. "I miss Dad every day, but I do not miss how things were after he died when Mom was always mad or gone." "Your dad made sure you were taken care of," I said, pulling him into a gentle hug, "and that is exactly what I intend to do for as long as you need me." That night, while Mason slept peacefully upstairs, I sat in Tyler's study. It was now a shared space where Mason did his homework while I handled household management. I opened the small box of personal items William had delivered after the final custody arrangement. Inside was one last letter from my son, marked "When it is resolved." "Mom, if you are reading this, you have done what I could not. Protected Mason from a situation I saw deteriorating, but could not fix in time." I watched as Brittany's priorities shifted. I saw her resentment toward family responsibilities grow. I noticed her increasing absences. When I discovered her relationship with Maxwell, I realized that Mason would eventually become collateral damage in her pursuit of the life she truly wanted. "I'm sorry for the burden I placed on you. Asking a mother to be a mother again at your age was not fair, but I knew you would do it without hesitation, just as you have always put family first." Mason could not ask for a better guardian, a more loving presence, or a stronger advocate. "Tell him stories about me. Not just the good ones, the real ones. About my mistakes and how I tried to fix them. About how sometimes we see the truth too late, but we do the best we can with the time we have. I love you both more than words can express. Tyler." I pressed the letter against my heart tears, flowing freely now that Mason could not see. The journey had been harder than I could have ever imagined. The pain of losing Tyler compounded by the battles with Brittany and the challenge of helping Mason heal from multiple traumas. However, as I looked around the home we now shared permanently at the evidence of a child growing up safe and loved. Homework scattered on the table, soccer cleats by the door art taped proudly to the refrigerator. I knew Tyler had been right to trust me with his most precious legacy. Through his foresight in changing his will, through my careful documentation and strategic patience, through Mason's remarkable resilience, we had created something beautiful out of tragedy, a new family constellation different from what any of us would have expected, but solid and true. Some might call it justice that Brittany finally chose freedom over motherhood, revealing exactly the character Tyler had anticipated. But I preferred to think of it as redemption, the opportunity to honor my son by raising his child with the values he cherished, ensuring that despite everything, love would have the final word in our story. Grandma, I got the lead role in the school play. Mason burst through the front door, his 11-year-old energy filling the house as he dropped his backpack and shoved a script into my hands. 3 years had transformed the quiet, anxious 8-year-old into a confident and thriving preteen whose smile now consistently reached his eyes. That is wonderful. I examined the script. Our Town by Thornton Wilder. Playing George Gibbs is a big responsibility. I am so proud of you. Miss Larson said Dad played the exact same role when he was in 8th grade. Did you know that My heart warmed at his casual reference to Tyler. We had worked hard to keep his father's memory alive through stories, photos, and the little traditions we kept. Saturday morning pancakes, summer fishing trips to Tyler's favorite lake, the memorial garden we tended together. I certainly did. I still have the program somewhere in the boxes up in the attic. Your father was quite the actor in school. I smiled, remembering a teenage Tyler nervously practicing his lines in our living room. He would be thrilled to see you following in his footsteps. Mason grinned. Then his expression grew more serious. Do you think we should tell Mom about the play? The question did not surprise me. Brittany had essentially disappeared from Mason's life after moving to Grand Cayman. Her promised video calls dwindled to rare and awkward birthday messages and eventually stopped altogether. Mason occasionally still sought a connection with her. We can send her an email with the dates, I said carefully. It is entirely up to you. He considered this. Then he shook his head. Maybe not. She did not reply when I wrote to her about winning the science fair, and she is probably still in Asia with Maxwell. Yes, through infrequent updates from William, who maintained minimal professional contact with Brittany's lawyer regarding support payments, we knew that she and Maxwell had married and were now developing resort properties in Thailand. The child support checks arrived regularly. It was the only commitment she kept, but they contained no personal notes or questions about Mason's well-being. Whatever you decide is fine, I assured him, maintaining the balanced approach our family therapist had recommended, acknowledging Brittany's existence without creating false expectations about her return or involvement. I think just you, the Wilsons, and Uncle William are enough of an audience for me, Mason decided. He was referring to our neighbors who had become extended family and to William Hughes, who had transitioned from Tyler's lawyer to a beloved uncle figure in Mason's life. As Mason ran up the stairs to start his homework, I headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. I paused to adjust the collection of photos on the refrigerator. Mason winning his karate tournament, building a science project, laughing with friends at his last birthday party. A visual timeline of healing and growth. The journey had not always been smooth. The first year after gaining full custody had brought nightmares, academic struggles, and occasional outbursts of anger as Mason processed the effective loss of both parents. There had been challenging questions that I struggled to answer. Why does Mom not want to talk to me anymore? Did I do something wrong to make her leave? If Dad had not died, would Mom have stayed? With the help of an excellent child psychologist, we had navigated these painful waters together. I had learned to validate his feelings without vilifying Brittany, to help him understand that her choices reflected her limitations, not his worth. Now, 3 years later, Mason had found his balance. His grades were excellent, his circle of friends solid, his emotional resilience remarkable for a child who had experienced such significant losses. The house, which had once been Tyler's, then briefly mine, had truly become ours, filled with evidence of our shared life. Mason's art projects displayed alongside my watercolor attempts, his sports gear sharing space with my gardening tools, photo albums documenting our camping trips and holiday celebrations. At 68 years old, I had found an unexpected vitality in this second round of parenting. The responsibility had given me purpose, while Mason's energy kept me active and engaged. I had even recently started dating a kind widower I met through the community theater where Mason took acting classes. Nothing serious yet, but a pleasant reminder that life continued to offer surprises at every stage. My phone dinged with a text message from William. Court approved the restructuring of the college fund. Everything is set for Mason's future education, protected exactly as Tyler wanted. Another piece of Tyler's careful planning falling into place. Despite Brittany's initial attempts to gain control of Mason's educational trust, Tyler's foresight had created unbreakable protections. Now those funds were secured in a structure that would provide for Mason's college and perhaps even graduate school, regardless of what happened to me in the coming years. As I prepared dinner, I reflected on the strange path that had brought us here, the midnight call that had shattered our world, the gradual revelation of Brittany's true character, the careful strategy that had finally protected Mason from becoming collateral damage in her pursuit of a different life. In my darkest moments during those early days after Tyler's death, I never could have imagined the life Mason and I would build from the ashes of that tragedy. The grief remained. It always would. But it had integrated into a new reality filled with meaningful connections and moments of genuine joy. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw our neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, holding a covered dish. "I made too much lasagna again," she announced as I opened the door. It was her standard excuse for the meals she regularly shared with us. "And Bill wants to know if Mason is still coming over to help with the birdhouse project this weekend. He has not talked about anything else." "He has not talked about anything else either," I confirmed, accepting the dish gratefully. "Would you and Bill like to join us for dinner? Mason just got some exciting news about the school play." As Mrs. Wilson stepped inside, calling upstairs to congratulate Mason, who responded with enthusiastic thanks, I felt the quiet satisfaction of community, of the support network we had built around us extending far beyond biological family. Later that night, after Mason had gone to bed, I sat in the quiet stillness of the living room and opened the memory book we had created during that difficult first year. Photos of Tyler at various ages, Mason's childish handwriting describing favorite memories of his dad, cards from friends and family offering support during our custody journey. On the final page was a quote from Tyler's last letter to me. "Tell the story about me, not just the good ones, the real ones about my mistakes and how I tried to fix them." I had honored that request, sharing with Mason the full human truth of his father, a good man who had recognized that his marriage was failing, who had seen the potential impact on his son, who had taken concrete steps to protect his child's future, even while hoping those protections would not be necessary. Outside the garden Tyler had loved, and Mason now helped tend, caught the last golden light of the day. The roses he had planted were blooming again, a reminder that life continues its cycles regardless of our personal losses. Inside, his son slept peacefully, surrounded by photos of the father who had loved him enough to ensure his protection even after death. As I closed the memory book and got ready for bed, I thought about Tyler's extraordinary foresight. He could not have known exactly how events would unfold. He could not have predicted his own premature death or Brittany's eventual complete departure from Mason's life. However, he had recognized the essential character of the woman he had married. He had seen the warning signs that she prioritized personal desires over family responsibilities, and he had taken concrete steps to protect what mattered most to him. In doing so, he had given both Mason and me an unexpected gift. Not just financial security or legal protection, but the opportunity to forge a new family bond that might never have developed otherwise. Through our shared grief and subsequent healing, Mason and I had created something beautiful and lasting, a relationship built on mutual trust, respect, and genuine love that transcended traditional family boundaries. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, helping Mason memorize lines for his play, attending my own water aerobics class that kept my joints mobile, coordinating with William on long-term financial planning, ordinary life continuing in its imperfect and precious way. But tonight, in the stillness of the home we had built together, I felt profound gratitude for my son's final gift, the opportunity to help raise his child, to see Tyler's best qualities emerging in Mason, to ensure that despite everything, love and wisdom would be his son's true inheritance, not the legacy any of us would have chosen perhaps, but one we had transformed through courage, persistence, and boundless love into something unexpectedly beautiful. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you gone through something similar? Comment below if you enjoyed this story. Welcome to our story, family, and check out 2 other favorites from the channel. My husband left me nothing in his will. So I checked the safe, and after 40 years of marriage, I discovered my husband's secret family.